Welcome to the TeenPreneur Show. I'm your host, Dia Coley, and I'm a teenpreneur, bringing you global entrepreneurs who are teenagers. They have started out really young and are an inspiration to all. They prove to be the perfect example of how teenagers can rise high. So tune into this show every week to know more about these young game changers and be inspired by these teens. Watch the young dream big. Now on with the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's Teenpreneur Show. I'm your host, Dia Coley, and I'm also a teen entrepreneur. I'm the founder of Redone It by Dia, which recycles denim, empowers women, and donates all of its profits towards cancer research and cancer treatment. But now let's get on with the show. We have Mitra. He's 17 years old and from Canada. Let's bring him on.
Hi there.
Hi, Neil. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm great. So you are the CEO and founder of Icane. Can you tell us a little bit about this business?
Yeah, for sure. So what we do at Icane is essentially we develop socially assistive robotics to help the visually impaired. Essentially, we are currently developing a semi-autonomous robotic guide dog that can attach to a standard blind person's white cane, and it could help
Mhm.
them navigate from one location to another more effectively than current haptic navigation systems.
Wow, that's super interesting. So with Icane, is there only one specific type of technology, or is there like different products that you're creating?
So with iCade, we're mostly focusing on one product since we are quite early
Okay.
stage. We
Mhm.
recently secured our seed round just last year of financing. So our first round of financing was last year. And
Wow.
right now we are working on developing that product, getting letters of intent from our customers, and
Mhm.
scaling it on that end to potentially raise our Series A soon.
Wow, that's great. And I want to know, when did you start this whole business?
Yeah, so I started developing the initial prototypes for the product, which would soon become iCane back in grade seven. So this would probably be like early
Wow.
2017.
Uh-huh.
And since then, like throughout grade seven, grade eight, I just kept on developing the device. And in grade nine, which is around early September, October of 2018, I decided to form the startup. And we joined
Mhm.
an incubator here in Waterloo called Flowboat. And through there, we were entered in this competition called MIT LaunchX Clubs. And we were fortunate enough to be selected as one of the 20 out of 1,000 high school startups internationally to
Wow.
pitch in front of investors at MIT. So that
Yeah.
happened around April of 2019 and April to May of 2019. And then we just continued developing on the product end, on the business end, and raised our seed round in August of 2020. So right now we're incorporated out of the state of Nevada in the US
Hmm.
as a domestic C corporation or as an international C corporation. And we're currently working on developing our device and hopefully getting those customers soon.
Yeah, that's all sounds amazing, and congratulations with that collab that you were telling me about MIT. That's totally amazing. I also want to know, how many years of research has this taken?
Yeah, so I would say like probably around 4 years of R&D in the entire
Mm-hmm.
company's history. So yeah, 4 years of R&D on the product, and uh, realistically speaking, for the actual company itself, maybe around 2 years to
Okay.
like actually really scale our tech.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, and all these things that you're doing is super complicated. I want to know if there were any bumps in the road during the whole research process.
Yeah, so really the developmental process of like our product at iCane, we went through nearly hundreds of iteration of our devices, and this was like both software and hardware related. Just changed the
Mm-hmm.
code, seeing if it worked. If we changed the software, the hardware wouldn't work, and if we changed a bit of the hardware, the software wouldn't work, and so forth. Just a whole bunch of back and forth in the development, and it was just all robotics and mechanical engineering development from there on in, really. And it's just it's just a lot of understanding really how hardware, all these components work together, and determining what exact dimensions of the device and so forth would optimize the efficiency at which the robot would navigate these different
Mm-hmm.
environments. So really, it was a lot of navigation optimization. We had to work with several different algorithms, and we
Yeah.
ended up having to create our own algorithms on the software end, since there wasn't really any pathfinding algorithm that we could use, which was to integrate the
Yeah.
sensors that we were using. So yeah, that's currently the stage of the company, and it is just a lot of iterations to get to where we are now.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to know, maybe not for similar businesses for you, but I know there's a lot of similarities in just having a business. So I want to know if you have any tips for someone going through like similar challenges that you were mentioning.
Yeah, for sure. I think the number one tip is just to never give up. Really, just be really stubborn when it comes to R&D.
Uh-huh.
It usually goes a very very long way, and sometimes it's always good to like take a step back, take a break, and like think back to where you started and
Hmm.
just go back to like the starting points and start building up from there. We had to like restart our development so many times. Like I think there was like 10 or 15 times where we just said, okay, this is leading nowhere. Let's go back to the previous build and see what we can do from there.
Hmm.
Simply because the code that we were improving or the hardware that we were improving uh, was realistically going to nowhere. So we sometimes had to go back all the way back to like our very first initial versions, which didn't use like any pathfinding algorithm whatsoever, which is just basic calibration code. So we just decided
Hmm.
to like go back to first principles and really build from there. And
Yeah.
doing that can really help sometimes. So like always be sure to not get too dived into what you're doing, because sometimes you might
Hmm.
miss things that, from an external point of view, can be very obvious. So it's always good to go back to that external point of view and see the broad picture of things, and connect it to the specifics. That's really how
Yeah.
development would work.
Yeah, that's some great advice that you just gave us there. I want to also get into the real beginning of Icane. Can you tell me like how and where did it really start?
Yeah, so as I previously mentioned, back in grade seven, um, really why I decided to create Icane was because my own grandmother was visually impaired, and
Oh.
I was competing at science fairs,
Hmm.
so I didn't know what project I was going to take up. So I decided, okay, let me see if I can help my grandmother somehow, and that's essentially how the device started to develop.
Wow, that's amazing. And um, how did it grow from just a science project now into this really big business?
Well, I wouldn't say we're really big yet. We're still very very early stage, but
Uh-huh.
like I would say like really through science fair you just develop a lot of connections, and then once you get into like
Hmm.
accelerators and so forth, you start developing those business connections. So
Yeah.
initially you would have like all these STEM connections. Really, you would all have these like research connections and so forth, and you would leverage that for your R&D end. And in some cases,
Hmm.
you might have some connections to investors and so forth. But really, joining accelerators is the fastest way to grab those business connections and
Yeah.
really understand how the business world works. The best way to do that is by reading books, in my opinion. So what I did when we were like drafting our initial business plans and so forth, I just like read a lot of documentation online, read a lot of business books, like even personal books relating to business conversations and
Hmm.
so forth. Just reading all of that really helps, and I feel like a lot of business is just reading the right material and
Yeah.
deriving your own plan from reading your first principles, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I want to know, was there anyone to help you along the way? Did you have any other collaborations with Icane?
Well, besides my actual team, which really helped in terms of our marketing side as well as our business development side, I
Hmm.
mostly worked on the R&D end and a bit of the marketing here and there, really. but like in general, really the team that we have at Icane is simply amazing. We work quite
Yeah.
cohesively with one another, and if it wasn't for them, we'd probably not be here right now. So our team is definitely a very core part of the journey. As for other
Yeah.
collaborators, we we are currently still in the process and talks with the Canadian National Institute for the Blind to conduct
Mhm.
research user to conduct like mass user testing of the device. So obviously, due to COVID-19, that did not go through, unfortunately. But as COVID-19 cases here in Ontario and in Canada in general start to decline and so forth, we can definitely go back into talks. And as vaccination rates ramp up, it should
Yeah.
be good news from there. So yeah.
That sounds great. I want to also know more about your team. Can you tell us a little bit about them and maybe their like jobs or their duties?
Yeah, for sure. So, in terms of our executive board, we have Sneh Shah, who's our chief business development officer. So, I believe he's currently going into his first year at university here at the University of Waterloo.
Mm-hmm.
And he's simply a very bright fellow in terms of business development. And we also have our chief technology officer, Eric Lungalescu, who is in his second year, I believe, in software engineering here at University of Waterloo as well. So he
Mm-hmm.
really helps in terms of the algorithm development and so forth of our device. And that's as per our executive board is considered. Then underneath them, we have Sophia Murphy, Aryan Betty, and Richard Wang, who are all our marketers and business developer teams. And then we also have Shiv
Mm-hmm.
Patel, who works in terms of our CAD modeling and design aspect of the engineering side of the hardware end. And
Yeah.
essentially, my duty is just to connect all those departments together. Hope they all work together and like really focus on the core hardware
Mm-hmm.
development itself, so integrating both the software and the hardware components together. Excuse me,
Yeah.
and
I see.
ensuring all of that works together. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like super cool and that you all like fit together and like do all this stuff together. And they're all around your age. I know you mentioned they're maybe a little older, some of them, but were you friends before, or how did you guys meet up and kind of come together?
Yeah, so like majority of the team, like no, we were never previously friends, but obviously like as we started with the company and so forth, we definitely grew close. But really, the way that we were able to, the way that I was able to recruit the people were one through the accelerator there at Flowboat, and then from there it was just through Instagram and LinkedIn marketing, really, that got us the
Wow,
talented
that's
people that we
cool.
needed.
That's cool. And yeah, you've been people, and then now you've become friends with them, and you've been working with them. That's really nice. Um, I kind of want to get a little back to iCane. You was inspired by your grandmother. But I want to know, has there been a further development in what goals or missions you have with this business?
So really, our biggest development is to just make the device autonomous. Like currently, we have a
Hmm.
semi-autonomous model, and we want to make it autonomous so it doesn't depend on low-cost infrastructure basis.
Hmm.
Since right now it requires some level of infrastructure that the city needs to implement, which are thermoplastic paint lines. So we want to remove that and have just full like autonomy in the robotic end of the device. So that's something that we're really working on to
Hmm.
ensure. So I would say like the first principal roots in terms of helping visually impaired individuals are still there within the company. We aren't expanding towards other marketplaces just yet, since that's usually what companies would do once they start generating the revenue and have enough money to go ahead and explore in a new market space and so forth. Um,
Hmm.
but right now, the only pivots that we've done so far is on the product end to just really help the visually impaired more than anything.
Yeah. And I want to know, how did you get the concept of the product iCane?
Yeah, so this is an interesting story. So I was actually at a Raptors game when I was in grade seven, and like
Okay.
I had to travel to Toronto for it, and essentially like on the subway stations, I saw these yellow bumps. I didn't know what they were. It turns out there's something called tactile paving, and it's what visually impaired individuals have been using for like the past 50 years or something with their white canes. to
Okay.
understand where they're going. But the issue is tactile paving to implement it effectively in places like Toronto, it would take upwards of $30 million in US figures to implement. So it's definitely not the most economical solution. And at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
the white cane, as well as other haptic technologies, for example, WeWalks, Smart Cane, and so forth, they lack their efficiencies in terms of pure guidance. They just alert where obstructions are. They don't help in terms of navigation,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which can like they don't show them the path in terms of navigating, which can pose various safety hazards. So in order to avoid that, what I thought was, okay, let me see if I can replace these tactile pavings with something cheaper with a low
Mm-hmm.
cost infrastructure basis and see if that can be implemented all around and just create a robot that is able to detect uh, this infrastructure implementation and just navigate on those sections. So that's essentially what I developed. And the infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
basis was essentially paint lines. That was the initial concept. So right now, in order to make it autonomous, we want to get rid of those paint lines. So no
Yeah.
infrastructure basis is required. It's just completely autonomous. And yeah, from
Mm-hmm.
there, I just kept on filing our provisional patents and then non-provisional utility patents and so forth, protecting the IP until I went to do grade 9 and I started really building out the business end of the company
Yeah.
and still continue with that R&D.
Well, that's amazing. When did you actually launch Icane?
Yeah, so Icane, like from a technical business perspective, it was launched in August of 2020, since that is when we were
Okay.
incorporated. But it was
Mm-hmm.
the project launch, like the official like project that were to become the company, launched back in like October of 2018, and like the science fair background
Yeah.
was back in
Yeah.
I don't know, like January of 2017 or something. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've been doing it for a while. I want to know, is starting a business something you kind of planned on doing, or is it something that you wanted to always do?
So like I just fondly remember in grade 9, like I was very much interested in entrepreneurship simply because I wanted to scale the science fair project that I was working on. And in my opinion, if you're going to do research and development, research and development are both very important, both in academia as well as in
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. So I think like if you're able to scale hardcore academic research, let it be in robotics, let it be in biotech, let it be in whatever discipline that you're interested in, like software engineering and so forth, as long as you can like really scale those hardcore concepts to help the people
Mm-hmm.
across the world to make essentially to advance humanity, is something that I'm really behind, and to create a more socially equitable place. As long as your research and development can do that, that is very important to scale it. So that
Yeah.
was my main driving force behind getting into entrepreneurship, and I guess I just really liked it from there on.
Yeah, it's great. And I love how you combined, your interest in entrepreneurship with your interest in like engineering and science. That's like amazing. And then you just brought it to one. That's great. Means like you're doing what you love.
Yeah.
I also want to get into the awards that you have won for iCane. I know there has been several, and you mentioned a few, but I know there's a little more, and I would like to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. So besides the MIT LaunchX Club's recognition,
Hmm.
throughout the science for history, like I received silver medals at the Canada-wide Science Fair back in 2017, and throughout 2018 and 2019, just the regional level
Hmm.
gold medals there. So yeah.
That's great. And do you like plan on maybe entering in like other contests, maybe nationally or internationally for this business that you've created?
So besides like pitching competitions, there's really like nothing else. Like right now, the best way to raise for us is through venture capital and private equity, since
Hmm.
that is where like the idealistically that's where most of the money that we need for funding would come from. And
Yeah.
venture capital and private equity just offers you the connections that you most likely wouldn't receive from a generic pitch competition unless it's from an accelerator or an incubator. So
Hmm.
uh, really going that route of private equity and venture capital funding is something that we need to do, and we are planning on doing.
Yeah, that's great. I kind of want to go a little further. I know you have another organization called Mitra Biotechnologies. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So Mitra Biotechnologies, like right now, we're mostly in stealth mode. But what we
Uh-huh.
develop is essentially rapid point of care diagnostics. So this
Okay.
relates to like the laboratory diagnostic market. So um, essentially, we are combining centrifugation and like these ELISA processes on paper, so
Hmm.
that you could effectively detect and predict cardiovascular disease in a matter of 2 minutes, detect and predict any disease condition you want within that time frame, within that
Wow.
2 to 5 minute time frame, and do like early detection of cancers and so forth, and all these different diseases right at the point of care, right in ambulances, right at hospitals, and so forth, without having
Yeah.
to wait 3 or 4 days at a laboratory to get your diagnostic result. Um,
Hmm.
so that's actually what we're developing. We currently have advisors from the University of Waterloo, who are Institute for
Wow.
Nanotechnology, as well as the University of Toronto, helping us on our research and development, as well
Hmm.
as an investor advisory board consisting of venture capitalists and angel investors, essentially guiding us through those FDA processes and so forth, and integrating that
Yeah.
with our scientific advisory board to ensure that we have um, to ensure that we have a product that works and that can help people.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, this is like super amazing. I love even Icane and I love the concept of this. Can you tell me how you came up with this idea?
Yeah, so for this one, it's also like a personal backstory. So back in,
Mhm.
I believe it was like January of 2019, one of my close aunts actually passed away due to a myocardial episode. So the doctors had no way of understanding what proper interventional cardiology care was to be
Mhm.
taken to help my aunt survive, essentially, due to the lack of fast diagnostic results in the case of cardiovascular disease. So
Mhm.
I essentially thought of how I could do stuff to help. And in May of 2019, I believe that like I started filing provisional patents for the uh, for the device. And I think in January of 2020, I started researching on the device and got all my research and tested my concepts out, proved that it worked by March of
Mhm.
2020. And just since then, it's just been like working on the company, developing it, and right now we're raising our
Yeah.
seed round of financing.
Yeah, that's great. Is iCanes and Biotechnology, sorry, kind of similar or connected in some way?
So it's completely opposite, or like
Okay.
not opposite, but like they're completely separate from one another.
Okay.
Icane deals with navigation assistance and robotics for the visually impaired. Mitra Biotechnologies
Hmm.
caters to anyone really, to literally any person who needs a blood test done.
Okay. And was this started before iCane or is it more of a new concept?
Yeah, it's definitely much more newer. I started the company going like in the summer of when I was going into grade 11, so it was around June of 2020. I decided
Hmm.
to start Mitra Biotechnologies. So yeah.
That's great. And I know you have a team for iCane, but do you have a team helping you for this?
Yeah, so like we do all of our private recruitment and so forth in like July, August
Okay.
months, and we're currently a team
Hmm.
of, including myself as the moment, we're a team of 26 people. So it's
Wow.
definitely a much larger company, since we simply
Hmm.
have higher traction there, and we're also as a biotech company, we need more R&D.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that, and that's super great. Is it hard balancing the work of both of them?
So I'd say balancing both startup companies as well as school and all of that, like
Hmm.
let's just say that Google Calendar is very helpful in some cases. And just like yeah, like I would say it's important to have a balance of everything.
Yeah.
And like the best way to do it is just like focus on one task at a time, not get distracted, don't attempt to multitask anything. You can
Hmm.
parallel tasks, like give a certain task for somebody else to work on in this company while you go ahead and focus on another task at another company and so forth. while you know that somebody trustworthy is going ahead and executing the task that you gave them there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just sort of like managing your time that way, and uh, like
Yeah.
understanding which part of your focus should go where. And I think it's very very good to just focus on one thing at a time when you time block it in your
Mm-hmm.
schedule and not worry about anything else. And then once that period is done, you
Yeah.
can just do whatever you like at that point. Really, like I would say scheduling. Like for me and like most of my teammates, especially, like we really like to work on what we do and we're quite passionate about it. So definitely
Mm-hmm.
like forcing ourselves to like schedule times where we can like take a break and just like understand what we're doing, see everything from the broader
Yeah.
picture, and see how far we've come. Is
Mm-hmm.
important to like sustain that motivation to keep on working. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's some great advice. I want to also ask you if you have some advice for maybe upcoming entrepreneurs or someone who's just trying to start off their business.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. So it depends on what type of business you are going for. Like if it's something soft tech related, like computer science or software engineering, as long as you're good at coding, you can just grab a couple of your buddies and start creating a SaaS software product,
Mm-hmm.
get a Stripe API on board, and start generating revenue right off the bat. Like to create a SaaS companies nowadays, I'm pretty sure like it takes like 3 months or something like that to just start generating revenue. Like you can have a revenue
Uh-huh.
generating business through SaaS quite easily. But SaaS is a very competitive space nowadays, especially,
Mm-hmm.
and investors just want to see like they want to see your KPIs, how much DAUs you have, like daily active users, and so forth. What's your
Mm-hmm.
growth rate at? How many users are signing up? How many users are paying, and so forth for SaaS. Um, so that's software as a service. But if you're going to do something more hard tech related, it'll probably take you about 10 years before you start generating revenue. So 5 to 10 years is usually like how hard tech startups operate. And for that, it's just like years of R&D. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're starting out in like a software space, just learn coding really well and see a need that the general mass population or a specific niche in the industry requires and
Yeah.
go ahead and build that. In
Mm-hmm.
hard tech, uh, it, hard tech is like a fine line between moonshots and something that is impossible. So you want to mostly aim for stuff which are moonshots, but have backed
Mm-hmm.
thorough research behind them, and you have like proof of concepts to prove that this device can work. And yes, it's something that if it's there, people will buy it, sort of thing. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, like it's not that simple, but you obviously have marketing, business components, and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
really, it's R&D heavy. While software startups nowadays don't tend to be super R&D heavy, they tend to be more or less business and marketing heavy. And
Mm-hmm.
excuse me. So really, just really like understanding what sort of business you want to create, and if you're going to end up creating a hard tech company, just really work hard on your R&D. Try to partner or get in touch with university labs so that you can go ahead and research. And
Yeah.
for hard tech, it's more or less like a slow, long, hard, and very focused journey. It's not something that
Mm-hmm.
like you can just build in a year or like scale really fast and so forth, unless you have a lot of money. Then you can go
Yeah.
ahead and do that. But initially starting it, it's very rare to see like that level of funding to really
Yeah.
scale hard tech that quickly. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a slow journey, but it's definitely like a very hardworking journey. And
Yeah.
for hard tech or biotech, people who want to start out there, just really, really understand your first principles well and build up from there. There's no rush in hard tech, but for software, you really have to move fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. That's some great advice that you gave us there. I also want to know what are your future plans for both of these projects?
Yeah, so the future plan for Icane is to potentially like sell it up to a larger company and a more prestigious company so that they can go ahead and scale what we are doing, since that is
Yeah.
hardcore robotics tech. And
Mm-hmm.
I mostly want to focus more on Mitra Biotechnologies as of the moment, since that is biotech and that's something that I'm more passionate about overall. And
Okay.
like really like both of the teams have a lot of intersection. So
Mm-hmm.
I believe like the people who are working at Icane like almost all of them work for Mitra Biotechnologies as well. So there's a lot of intersection
Mm-hmm.
between the teams, and cohesively together, we understand that Icane's product is something that's very revolutionary for the visually impaired, and we believe that if we
Yeah.
were able to get that company acquired to a larger party that has a self interest in really helping the visually impaired, it can go a
Hmm.
long way to
Yeah.
help the visually impaired individuals at the end of the day. So that's what we believe is the best path for Icane. When it
Hmm.
comes to Mitra Biotechnologies, we just want to scale that towards IPO. So that one is definitely like much more long term, and we will stick to it until like throughout university and so forth after university until uh, we IPO and are publicly listed. So yeah.
Yeah, that's some great future ahead of you. And very much good luck with that. Thank you, Neil, for talking with us about both your projects. They both are amazing. And would you like to share your social media for anyone who wants to check them out?
Yeah, so if you want to get in contact with me, you can just search me up on LinkedIn or go search me up on Twitter at Neil Mitra underscore.
Mhm.
And yeah, like in general, if you want to see Icane or Mitra Biotechnologies, Icane's website is icane.ca, and Mitra Biotechnologies' website is mitrabiotechnologies.com. So yeah,
Great.
those are
Well,
those are our main links.
okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for watching this week's show. Make sure to tune in next week. If you want to learn more about what our show is about, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at TeenPreneur. See you next week.
Thank you for watching the TeenPreneur Show with Dia Coley. Follow us for more information at teenpreneur.show on Instagram. To be a part of the show, fill out the form in the Instagram bio. See you next week!